Good morning, folks. I think it's 9 o'clock, and I'd like to have all of us moving towards our seats. Get ready to start this meeting. So once again, I'll say welcome and good morning. Welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is May 16th, and I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent and make sure they're off the table so we can avoid feedback noise. You may notice board members accessing their laptops during the meeting. They are using the laptop solely to access the board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined to be necessary, keep your comments to within that time limit. So today we will work together to ensure that public protection is the highest priority in all of our decision making. So I would like to call the meeting to order and ask Jerry to please call the roll.
Burton.
Here.
Chan.
Here.
Chappelle Ingram. She's absent. Lai.
Here.
Laren.
Here.
Lay.
Here.
McKenzie. Absent. Medina.
Here.
Morrow.
Here.
Olag.
Here.
Pacheco.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Witcher.
Here.
You. Absent. We do have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Jerry. My report will be brief. We've had a couple of meetings. In March 2018, we had a board member orientation, and that orientation included an excellent review of all DCA resources available to all of our board members as we go about our business of consumer protection. It was nice to have Director Dean Graffillo with us, and Dean passed on some sage advice, and I thought I'd share it with the members of this committee, and especially for our newer members. His advice was be inquisitive, work well with others, learn to use the DCA resources, and so Dean, it was good having Dean open that meeting for us. So consumer protection is the core of everything that we do. All members, especially our newer members, need to attend that board member orientation within 1 year of appointment. It was an excellent review. It included a discussion of the top 10 traits of an effective board member, the role of the executive officer and the board, the Open Meeting Act, adjudication process, legislative and regulatory review, along with much else. The information was well presented and brought more clarity to the functions of an effective board and a board member. So it reinforced one of my beliefs, is that we are a well-functioning board and we are certainly focused on our core job. On April 21, Karen, our executive officer, and myself attended the Dental Hygiene Committee meeting and presented a brief update on DBC activities. We thank them for working together on infection control issue with the subcommittee, Noel Kelch and our Hong Lei. So we will continue to work as a team and draw upon each other's strengths. And for you newer board members, I will suggest that you schedule that board orientation at your earliest opportunity. Now, as you're getting your feet under yourselves as a new board member, I would ask that you take a look at our committee structure and let me know what committees would be appealing for you to be on, and we'll work to see that you're on the committee that you'd like to be on if possible. In the meantime, I'm going to appoint Rosalinda, I believe she goes by Rose, to the LCP committee so that she can attend that meeting today. So, and another aspect of my activity has certainly been the weekly conversations with our executive officer and how important that is to stay in close communication with Karen Fisher and Sarah, who are helping all of us get through this important work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Fisher, who is going to give her the privilege of introducing our new board members.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. As you know, on Friday the 13th, I think it happened actually, April 13th, the governor appointed our 4 new board members. So we are welcoming them, and they are off to a great start. All of them arranged their schedules to come to Sacramento and have a mini orientation with me, and I appreciate their flexibility in being able to do that. We know what a huge agenda we have this year, and so I explained to them that the good news and the bad news about them being appointed at this time is all about sunset review. So on the one hand, the good news is that they'll be learning a lot about the board in a short period of time because we'll be going over essentially what we've done in the last 4 years, and then they'll have an opportunity to see essentially where we'll be going in the future. So, but the bad news is that it's a lot of work, and we appreciate their enthusiasm at this point. So far, they haven't run out of the room, even though they had 20 pounds of material to carry to this meeting this time. So I think I'm going to yield right now just to give them each a little opportunity to say a few things should they choose to do so. And we will start with Dr. Lilia Laren.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Dr. Lilia. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Dr. Lilia Larin from San Diego. I'm a general dentist, and I've had my own practice since 1992. And I've been involved with organized dentistry for over 20 years. Right now, I'm currently on the board of the San Diego County Dental Society, and I'm chair of the CE committee. My passion is dentistry and advocating for the public, and I'm very excited to be here. I'm in the right place. I know I'm in the right place, and I look forward to working with the board members and the public on the issues. And I have 2 sons that are dentists also. And I also was a RDA for 6 years before being a dentist, so I'm also would be very helpful in that situation.
Thank you, and I'll just remind all members, we need to push the button to be heard. Only 4 mics can be on at a time, so we'll just ask you to remember to push your button off when you finish speaking. And just for the new members also, we're webcasting our meetings, and so this is on being webcast live, and we also archive these meetings, so after the board meeting, you can go to our website and access any of the recorded meetings that have occurred in the past. So I think next we'll go to Rosalinda. Would you like to say a few things?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm very excited and eager for this new role and this appointment. I've been in the dental field for 10 years as a registered dental assistant. I currently work for Pacific Dental Services. I completed my undergrad at La Sierra University in Riverside, California, and I'm currently working on my master's at the University of Redlands. And I look forward to meeting and collaborating with all of you. My goal and my focus is really to elevate the role of a dental assistant within California, but across the United States as well.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to Joanne Pacheco now. She's our hygienist on the board. Joanne?
Good morning, and I'm equally excited to be here with all of the board members. I'm a dental hygiene educator, been a dental assistant since 1979, graduated with my dental hygiene license in 1985. Been in education since 1997, so I'm just excited to be a part of the board.
Joanne. Dr. Yu is actually finishing up a mission trip, and he is probably in San Francisco as we speak, getting off the ship, and he's going to be getting down here as quickly as he can. We're expecting him perhaps around noon. So when he gets here, we'll greet them. If I could ask all the new members just to come up here, we have some pins that we would like to give you, and I think it's going to be a photo op too, that we'll just take a photo of the group. So if I could just ask you to just assemble behind me here, that'd be great. Well, again, welcome to our new members, and we're enthusiastic that you've been appointed. And now to our seasoned members, I'm calling you. You don't have to tap Yvette on the shoulder when you want a bio break, because we have more than a quorum.
Thank you, Karen. I think we are moving to agenda item number 4, approval of the February 8-9, 2018 board meeting minutes. Any corrections, additions?
President Stewart, I move
Dr. Morrow.
acceptance of the minutes as presented.
Dr. Morrow, is there a second?
Before we go, if we could look on page 11 of 14, I'm asking this be amended. It's a comment that I made. Second paragraph on that page, it says, Ms. Fisher stated that during the sunset review process, the board should consider or at least discuss statutory changes to allow a student who is using California Portfolio Program at their school in another state to utilize reciprocity towards pathway to licensure in California. So we'd be adding in another state and then in California. And with that, if there are no additional amendments, would the motioner and the second agree to those amendments?
I agree.
Who was the second?
Agree.
Okay. Let's call for the vote.
Public comment first.
Public comment?
Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Yes.
Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai,
Yes.
Laren, Lay, yep. McKenzie, absent. Medina,
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Olag,
Yes.
Pacheco, Stewart,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
you, absent. Pass.
Thank you. Karen, is there a way of capturing that thought in terms of agendizing the thought that you brought up, say in August, at another meeting, so that we can get it on the agenda? And can the staff help us remember that we want to have that discussion?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I think we're on item number 5, discussion of possible action regarding the appointment to the elective facial cosmetic surgery permit credentialing committee.
I was going to give a little background to this committee. When I was hired in 2009, this was actually my baby. I was hired to be the analyst to support the elective facial cosmetic surgery credentialing committee. And for the benefit of the new members, this is a committee appointed by the board, and the committee is primarily oral surgeons, and they review operative reports and applications that are received in order for permits to be issued to do essentially just that, cosmetic elective facial surgery. So Dr. Witcher has been the liaison to that committee. We have a vacancy. There are 3 oral surgeons on the board, on this committee, and 2 medical people that are on this committee. We have a difficult time actually recruiting the medical people to participate. And so we've been fortunate enough to have an oral surgeon who is dual degreed and qualifies to fill that spot. He has been on the committee for a number of years, and so he reapplied to be filling this vacancy. That then will create the vacancy that he held, which we feel might be easier to fill because it is an oral surgeon's position, and people, we feel that we'll get more candidates for that. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Bruce Witcher for his comments and his recommendation.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, and thanks for recapping the functions of the committee for the new members. Yeah, I thought I would just add one comment, and that is that oral surgeons who have a dental degree are the ones who need this permit if they're doing cosmetic surgery that's outside the usual scope of dental practice. Many oral surgeons have both medical and dental degrees, and if they're licensed as physicians in the state of California, then they don't need this permit. So this is really for the single degree OMSs. And basically, the Facial Cosmetic Surgery Committee usually meets separately, usually by conference call, try to have face-to-face meetings once in a while. It's difficult to get everybody together. And they basically function as a credentialing committee, like a hospital credentialing committee. You know, they review the qualifications. There are 2 different pathways by which you can get this permit, and I won't go into that. But basically, there's 5 members. One's a representative of the Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery community. The other is ENT. They also do facial plastic surgery. And then the 3 oral surgeons. And so basically, as Karen described, that one of our members is kind of an unusual background in that he's qualified both as a head and neck surgeon, ENT physician, and also has training in oral surgery and holds both degrees. And so with that background, our applicant for the vacancy on the ENT category is Dr. Luke Gallia. He practices in Sacramento, and as I've given you his qualifications, his resume is attached for your information. He's well known to the committee, having served for many years in one of the oral surgery positions, and he has been an active participant during the conference calls and really has done a good job providing consistent input. I mean, this committee really functions at a very high level. It's, you know, they take this very seriously. And so with that, it's my pleasure to recommend to you Dr. Gallia for appointment to this position on the EFCS committee. Thank you. If I could have a motion to accept the recommendation, I guess is how we should do this. Through the chair.
Absolutely.
Motion?
Second.
Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Comment before you take the roll call.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, Jerry, my mistake. Public comment before we take the roll call. Thank you. Seeing none, thank you.
okay. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai,
Yes.
Laren, Lay, McKenzie, absent. Medina,
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Olag, Pacheco, Stewart,
Yes?
Witcher,
Yes.
you, absent. The motion passes.
Just as a reminder, when you move an item, if you would identify yourself. So just, you know, Abigail, motion, move, who would be second, so that it's easier for us to follow. Because where we are, we can't see everybody, so it'd just be easier. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Witcher. I think we're moving on to item 6, the budget report.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, board members. My name is Zach Rasky. I'm the budget analyst for the board. Today, I will be presenting the budget report, which summarizes the expenditures through February 28th, 2018. So the board manages two funds, the State Dentistry Fund and the State Dental Assisting Fund. These are not commingled. Sorry. So as of February 28, 2018, the board spent approximately.
Hey, Zach.
Sorry.
You're good. Relax.
Sorry.
Everybody
Nervous.
knows you. You want to tell a joke?
Why did the skeleton cross the road? Why didn't? Because he didn't have the guts.
Thank you. That broke the ice. Okay, here we go.
All right. So the board spent approximately $7.6 million, or 55% of its expenditures through February 28, 2018, and that is of the dentistry fund. Of the $7.6 million, approximately $4.1 million of the expenditures were for personnel services and $3.5 million were for operating expenses. For comparison purposes, last year at this time, the board spent $7.6 million, or 72% of its dentistry fund appropriation. Approximately 49% of the expenditures were for personnel services and 51% were for operating expenses. So attachment 1 summarizes the expenditures through February 28, 2017 or 2018. Yes, Ms. Burton.
Can you speak to the red numbers at some point?
On the attachment?
Right, on one.
Okay, yes. So I'll get to that. So basically, this is split up. This summarizes our expenditures by line items. So in the previous page, I broke down the personnel services and the operating expenses. So you can see on the attachment 1 how it breaks down each line item. So if you want to see, what is contained in each one of those categories, you can go down the current year expenditures to February 28, 2018, and it also compares it to last year at the same time. The unencumbered balance is basically each category, there's an appropriation amount for that category. And so the unencumbered balance is how much we have left, I believe. So in the red, that means that we have, so you could see the budget shown is $96,000 and we've already spent $79,000. So I believe the $23,520 is the amount left. Is that correct, sir?
On attachment 1, it does provide an expenditure projection. What we pay attention to is the bottom line. So this document is more, think of it more of an internal document, kind of our line item budgets per se. We have the flexibility of working with the budget office to make adjustments on our spending. So it fluctuates from year to year. It's not the lines that are noted in red on the unencumbered balances. That's not a concern at this point. What we're looking at is this overall bottom line on the net appropriation. The $13.7 million is our overall net appropriation for governor's spending for the year. What we focus more on is the fund condition, which is attachment 1A, and that's a reflection of all of the revenue that we've been collecting, what our projected revenue is. We are solely funded through the revenue collected through licensure and permitting fees. And then we look at the bottom line there with the expenditures backed out of our revenue and what our months in reserve are looking like. So I wouldn't focus too closely on those individual line items because we do have that flexibility. We are in good shape. We typically never overspend our appropriation. Karen.
And I would just add to that, you'll recall that the department is switching over from their past way of doing the accounting, and coming into fiscal. And so the reports may start looking very different. But as we've said before, don't be, and I know it's difficult because we have our members on our board who are, pay attention to detail, and you want to know what the red is, which is usually a flashing sign of danger. But again, we have the flexibility to be looking at our objects of expenditure, which is on the far left, and moving funds around. So we are not looking so closely at line items as we are the bottom line. Now, the important things to look at is essentially on the first column what the actual expenditures were last year. So the first yellow highlighted column is what those are the actuals that we spent. The budget stone in the middle, the yellow line in the middle, is essentially what we shoot for. That's what we have been, we put that line item in appropriations. And again, we have the ability to go back and forth between categories and between lines. So the important things to go all the way down to the net appropriation at the bottom. You can see that our net appropriation for the budget stone is a little over 13 million. And then the current expenditures to date, or what Zach had mentioned in his report, the 7,183,000. Does that help answer the question?
And also, some of these percentages are very high in the columns if you look at percent spent. But we just need to go back and adjust those percentages. Those were set a long time ago, but we have to work with our budget office at DCA to have those adjusted. So like one of them says 864% for, I think it's travel insurance, but really we're just looking at the amount we spent. The amount that's appropriated for that line needs to be adjusted, and we're working on getting those adjusted so that it's more of an accurate reflection of the percentage. I know that was a concern before, and we had spoken with DCA about those. So we just need to work to update those expenditures too, so that those percentages are more in line.
And one more comment to make, as a reminder to our seasoned board members and as something new to our new members, we get invoices to pay, and we acknowledge the invoice, and then it goes off into I won't say a black hole, but it goes to many places within the department, accounting, so a lot of people have their hands on this. It's not as if we can have tight control over everything we do. We have control over the spending, because essentially no bills can be paid by the department unless we sign off on them. So in that respect, we do have control, but how these things end up in certain categories is something that happens in another part of the organization. So
Correct. Okay. Yes, this document isn't put together by us, but it's put together by DCA budget, and then they provide it to us. And now they're trying to, because they're in this new system fiscal, they have to extrapolate each item individually, so it's so that this document appears the same to all of us. So it's even more difficult on their part to try to put this together. So we can go over to the fund condition, which is 1A. Oh, sorry.
So how often is our expenditures reviewed? Like, programs that probably aren't as necessary versus things that we need to put money into. So is that done by us? Is that done by?
Well, I mean,
DCA?
on an individual basis, I'm tracking all the expenditures, and I'm maintaining that myself. But on the other end, we're getting these. We used to get them quarterly, but now it's, as you know, in the previous board meetings, we weren't able to present actuals. They were projections, and even this says projections. But it's typically this kind of thing is built in for us once a quarter by the budget office, and we can request it more often. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I just want to know where we can save and also where we can put money into areas where we need it more.
Once we identify where we want to save, we can work with the DCA budget office to move around the money how we want it to be spent.
I would say, I would rephrase that, Dr. Lai. we don't need to save money. We need to make sure that the money we're spending is spent efficiently. When the governor appropriates a certain amount of money, the expectation is we're going to spend it. And we have actually had a reversion of a good amount of money over the last couple of years, which has allowed the board to stay afloat because we didn't raise fees for 18 years. So we're trying to get the ship back on course to make sure that we review things regularly to anticipate whether additional renewal fees or licensure fees would need to be increased. That being said, part of the reason we go down the road of stipulated settlements is to try to see whether certain discipline actions can be negotiated prior to going to hearings when we know that the end result of a license discipline will not be revocation. So we save money essentially on the hearing, bringing in witnesses, and things like that. So we're mindful of that. But again, I think what you're saying is we need to make sure that we're spending money efficiently, and I think we're doing that. I'm sure we're doing that. Can we always improve? Yes. But as I said, we've had these reversions, so we want to make sure that we're spending what we're supposed to be spending and that the programs are getting the attention that they need. Now, in terms of adding staff, that's a different challenge because in order to add staff, we need to go through the budget change proposal process, and that's a little bit more difficult. And we aren't prepared to necessarily talk about that today, but that's something we certainly can be talking about as we move forward. The whole budget change process and how that's done. And if it were as simple as us just being able to spend that extra funds to get the extra resources we need, that'd be wonderful, but it's not quite so simple.
So my comment is just based on, we just recently raised fees for dentists and soon for the assistants. I want to make sure they know we're doing our job to provide them with service since it's double, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So attachment 1A, the fund condition, this is basically summarizes our revenues and our expenditures. And at the bottom, it shows, what our balance is and our months in reserve. So our actuals for 16-17, those are our FM report that came out at the end of last year. And the 2017-18 is current year. The fees went up about halfway through this year. So those are just projections of how much we're going to have, but we won't fully know how much revenue we brought in until the end of the year. The months in reserve, 5.3, 4.2, and 4.3. So moving on to the dental assisting fund. The board spent approximately $1.36 million as of February 28th. That's 53% of the dental assisting fund. Of that amount, $547,000 was for personnel services and $813,000 was for operations. For comparison purposes, last year, the board spent roughly $1.4 million or 66% of its fund appropriation. Approximately 32% of that was for personnel services and 68% of that was for operating expenses. Then attachment 2 is the breakdown of our expenditures for the year. Any questions? Matt? And then 2A is our dental assisting fund condition. And you'll see the months in reserve are 9.3, 6.2, and 5.2. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Zach. We appreciate what you do. Let's see. Any public comment? Thank you. Okay, I believe we're on item number 7, discussion and possible action regarding appointments to Dental Assisting Council. Karen, I believe you're going to provide the background and.
Okay, well, so for the benefit of the new members, we have a dental assisting council, the members of which are appointed by the board. We currently have 3 vacancies. There are 7 members on the dental assisting council. 2 of them are board members. One is our RDA member, and then at any particular time, it's another board member. Dr. Witcher is on the council now, and Rose will be also on the council. Part of the reason why we didn't have a dental assisting council meeting today is we didn't have a quorum. So we only had 2 members, and then it was Dr. Witcher when we planned this. So we're looking forward to a full complement of council members at the August meeting, and they'll be rolling up their sleeves and getting down to work. We had a subcommittee of Ms. Burton and Dr. Witcher who reviewed the applications, and the 2 positions available essentially on the board are for 2 educators and 1 who is in clinical practice, either in a dental office or a safety net organization or for in the public arena. At this point, I'll hand it over to the subcommittee to determine what their comments are.
Fran, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and lead off and ask for your comments. Is that all right? Okay. So, as Karen mentioned at our February meeting, Dr. Stewart appointed a 2-person subcommittee composed of Ms. Burton and myself to review applications and recommend appointments to the Dental Assisting Council. We received 10 applications, and these were reviewed by the executive officer and legal counsel. All applications were, and 3 applicants were found to be ineligible, and we interviewed the remaining seven applicants by conference call. And we, in the past, Judy Forsyth, the RDA member, and I conducted these interviews, and so Fran was sort of serving in a dental assisting role. We thank her for that. And she also had the idea of using a different kind of interview process, and she asked Jerry Westerfield to coordinate the interviews, set up a schedule, and that way we were both able to interview the candidate at the same time. And it was really much more efficient than each member of the subcommittee individually interviewing and then comparing notes later. So this worked out really well, and Jerry did a fabulous job organizing, 7 interviews and 2 board members and all the different schedules. It was really great. So out of those applications, we brought forward 3 finalists who we've recommended for appointment to the council. As Karen mentioned, we had 2 openings for RDA faculty positions and 1 for practicing RDA. And the names that we brought forward are first Cindy Ovard. Cindy has attended a number of our meetings in the past. She was originally from Utah. She's currently director of the dental assisting program at San Joaquin Valley College in Temecula. Prior to holding that position, she held various faculty positions in the dental assisting program at Moreno Valley College and was a practicing RDA in the orthodontic office of Dr. Roy Miyamoto in Temecula. So do we want to take these individually or together? Okay, so we'd like to ask for a motion and a second and a vote to approve Cindy Ovard for appointment to the Dental Assisting Council, and this is for one of the faculty positions. Thank you.
Second,
Any
Letty.
comments from Fran or? Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
Letty.
Burton,
Yes.
Oh, wait.
Sorry.
Oh,
Public comment?
Okay. Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Yes.
Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai,
Yes.
Laren. Lay. McKenzie, absent. Medina. Morrow,
Yes.
Olag,
Yes.
Pacheco. Stewart,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
you absent. Motion passes.
Okay, and our next recommendation was for Ann Contreras to be appointed to the council again to a RDA faculty position. Most of you know Ann. She's an incumbent member of the council, has been on the council for 6 years. She's currently an instructor at Cerritos Community College and works part-time in the practice of, orthodontic practice of Jason Bach. She's also a orthodontic assistant. So with that, I'd like a motion and a second to reappoint Ann to the council.
Public comment?
Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Yes.
Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai. Laren. Lay. McKenzie, absent. Medina. Morrow,
Yes.
Olag,
Yes.
Pacheco. Stewart,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
you. Motion passes.
And finally, our recommendation for appointment to the RDA position, this is the practicing RDA position on the council, is for Pamela Peacock. Pam is currently employed by Contra Costa County Department of Health Services, where she works as a lead RDA coordinating the operations of 6 county clinics. She both practices and acts in county administration of those clinics, and is very active there in the field of their infection control education and other things. So she has great qualifications. So we look forward to your accepting our recommendation with the motion in a second. Thank you.
Move Burton. Second. Who's the second?
Who was the second? Okay.
Public comment?
Okay. Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Yes.
Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai.
Yes.
Laren.
Yes.
Lay. McKenzie, absent. Medina.
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Olag,
Yes.
Pacheco. Stewart,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
you, absent. Motion is passed.
Okay, thanks to you all for helping us fill out the membership on the Dental Assisting Council. Look forward to seeing everybody on the council at the next meeting.
So just as follow-up, we'll be sending a letter of congratulations to these candidates, and their employment packets will be sent out. So hopefully, everybody will be able to attend the August meeting, and we will once again have them reviewing dental assisting issues.
Thank you, Dr. Witcher, Ms. Burton, and Jerry for putting that work together. Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, I think we're moving
President
on to
Stewart, if I might have a question.
Dr. Morrow.
The appointment of a faculty position to the Dental Assisting Council, does that carry with it the requirement of any FTE requirement for time spent as a faculty?
I do not believe so. So are you asking whether they're full-time or part-time, or?
Yes, I'm just wondering if a faculty position requires a certain amount of faculty time that is spent in education, or is a part-time appointment all that's necessary?
I don't believe statute is specific on this area.
It is either.
All right. All right, we're moving to item number 8, dental assisting.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Wallace. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer of the Board and the current manager of the Dental Assisting Program. Our Board Dental Assisting Program includes 11 employees. At the last meeting, I had reported that we had been able to hire a Staff Services Manager 1 over the program. Since that time, that manager has left the board, and we are currently in the recruitment process to fill that position. And I hope to have that position filled within the next month or so. Additionally, it's been very busy the last few months. We have just completed the RDA EF examination administrations for the months of May at UCSF on May 5th and 6th and UCLA on May 12th. We have also embarked on completion of continuing education audits for dental assisting licensees. This is a newer process for dental assisting. This is an issue that came up as part of our sunset review. RDAs and RDA EFs are required to complete 25 units of continuing education for their biannual renewal, and within that, they are required to complete mandatory course requirements, which includes the Basic Life Support, the Dental Practice Act, and the infection control. And so as we're going through these audits, we are monitoring whether or not they're in compliance with those, and so they'll be notified of whether or not they are in compliance, or if they've not met the requirements of the audit, to which they will move to a cite and fine process as well. There's a few other things I wanted to touch on just briefly. We will be going into greater detail in future agenda items, but some other items we've been working on very closely include the dental assisting program reevaluations. This is an issue that was started by staff in January to come into compliance with all of the reevaluations of the existing approved programs. I will be discussing that more at a later agenda item. We've also been working diligently on the launch of the combined RDA written and RDA law and ethics examination, which is expected to take place next week. And of course, during this time of year, we've been processing a lot of applications. It's graduation time, so we expect the next few months to be pretty busy. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just want to get back to Dr. Morrow's question about the faculty status. So Business and Professions Code 1742 B2 says essentially 2 of those members shall be employed as faculty members of a registered dental assisting educational program approved by the board and shall have been so employed at least 5 years prior to appointment. So there's no discussion about whether they're part-time, 3/4 time, full-time.
Comments from the board? Public comment? Seeing none?
Moving on, can you hear me okay? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 8B, update on dental assisting program and course applications. The board has 2 staff that are solely dedicated to the review and evaluation of incoming program and course applications. This meeting material memo provides an overview of the applications that have been approved this year to date and how many overall programs and courses we've had. So in 2018, we've had a grand total of 14 applications approved. The table 1 provides a breakdown of which applications we've received. Table 2, we have conducted 8 site visits and reevaluations this year through the use of our subject matter experts. Table 3 provides an application or an overview of the program and course application status for this year. And then we have a grand total of 97 programs, RDA programs, on Table 4. That's an important number to remember for a future agenda item that I'm going to be touching on. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We've had discussion in the past about site visits. How does this number compared to last year?
I don't have the overall numbers from last year. We don't have a current backlog. We're up to date with all of our current applications. We utilize subject matter experts. We have a greater pool at this point because we have contracted with new subject matter experts that have gone to a training course in December. They've completed their homework assignments, so they're readily available to review the curriculum and conduct those site visits. This seems to be pretty average for right now. We're seeing more of an uptick in the orthodontic assistant course applications coming in. The courses do not require a site visit. The RDA programs do.
Question. This approval of the programs, is that just entry-level approval? In other words, do they have to have a reapproval cycle?
Yes, so in statute, or now it's in regulation. In regulation, every 7 years, there should be a reevaluation of the programs and courses. And I'm actually going to be speaking to that in another agenda item. But yes, once they get their provisional approval and then they get their full approval, they should be reevaluated by the board every 7 years.
And the follow-up question is, in the reapproval process, is the failure rate a piece of that puzzle?
Well, we're actually getting back on track with the reevaluation, so we haven't had anybody fail to date.
I meant the failure rate of the people passing the course and then applying for the RDA, not passing the RDA exams
I'm not sure if I understand the
for
question.
licensure.
So we haven't done the correlation.
Okay.
This is the process. What essentially Dr. Chan is asking is, have we done the correlation between the evaluations of the programs and the pass rates on our exams that we give them?
No,
We
not
have not yet done that correlation, but we're moving in that direction. And in order to do that, we are getting back on track. Prior to you being appointed to the board, Dr. Chan, this program was, I forget what my predecessor called it, but certain aspects of this program were floating out in the ozone or something. You'll recall we had backlogs, we had all kinds of problems. So over the last 6 or 7 years, we've been getting back on track with getting the programs evaluated and doing the site visits and things. So in that respect, we've come a long way. I think we're getting to a point where the board should be looking at how successful these programs are in preparing students to take the examination, so.
Sarah, when you're making the site visit and doing these evaluations, can you tell us just a little bit how those evaluations are structured? What kind of things are you looking at, and
Sure.
a little bit about that process?
So initially, the program will submit their curriculum and in an application to the board. That initial review is conducted by board staff and a subject matter expert. What they're looking for, any deficiencies from the requirements that are listed out in regulation. At that point, typically there's deficiencies with the program, and so the program addresses those deficiencies in the paper form. Once those deficiencies are addressed, then we'll go out and conduct the site evaluation. And so what we're looking for is compliance with all of the requirements that are in regulation, all of their clinical requirements, their didactic requirements, their laboratory requirements. Ensure that they have the adequate equipment available, that consumer protection is obviously in place, that they're in compliance with the infection control, and then they'll deem whether or not there's any deficiencies. If there are deficiencies, they'll notify the program and let them provide proof of compliance with that, and then they'll get their provisional approval.
I'm just curious, out of the 97 RDA approved programs, do you know how many of them are also CODA approved? And if a program is CODA approved, do we take that as an approved school, or do they still need to go through the board approval process?
I want to say, and I know Lori Gallardi is in the audience, I think it's about 20 programs? 19 to 20 programs that are CODA approved. Currently, the board does not accept the CODA approved dental assisting programs, carte blanche for approval as an RDA program. So that is something that we've considered and we've brought to the board in previous meetings. We've conducted a side-by-side comparison of our board requirements versus the CODA standards that those schools need to go through for that approval process. And what we found is there's a lot of alike requirements with the exception of the mandatory standalone courses, which include that coronal polish, that infection control, the pit and fissure sealant. So while we've been working on the development of these regulations, that's something that we're keeping in mind, understanding that there's several programs that want to go through the CODA process and also go through the board approval process. So trying to get that process to line up as closely as possible so it doesn't put an undue burden on those programs when they're submitting both of those applications.
Further questions of the board? Any public comment? Okay, thank you.
So agenda item 8C, update on RDA program reevaluations. So as Karen mentioned, there was a time in the board's history where we had a significant backlog in just the initial applications for programs and courses, and thankfully we've caught up with that backlog. We no longer have that backlog, and we have the staff resources necessary to embark on the the reevaluations of the currently approved RDA and RDA EF programs. So what that process has included was we needed to recruit additional subject matter experts to be able to have the resources necessary to review all of the curriculum packets that would be coming in, and then also to conduct all of the site evaluations. And so we recruited 10 new subject matter experts, which we lost one today because she's been appointed to the Dental Assisting Council. But those SMEs, as we call them, will be reviewing these curriculum. And so what staff has done is based on the examination scores that we have for the RDA Law and Ethics and the RDA Written Examination, we've prioritized which programs need to be evaluated first. And so, and I understand statistics can be modified in many different ways, but what we've chosen to do is what the overall passing rate is. The lowest passing rate we're going to be evaluated first. And so staff has notified programs on a monthly basis. We've notified five programs per month that they are going to be reevaluated. They've been asked to submit essentially the RDA program application to the board again. They'll need to fill out that application, provide all of their curriculum requirements, and essentially go through that application process again. That review will be conducted by board staff and the subject matter experts just within the paper product that they present. And then we have the flexibility to determine whether or not a site evaluation is necessary. So based on the findings of that curriculum review, then we'll determine whether or not a site evaluation is necessary. Now, to date, we've notified, I believe we're up to about 20 schools. Of course, it's an arduous process to put this information together, so some of them have requested extensions of 60 days, which we have granted, but the feedback has been positive. We haven't had any negative feedback received so far, and we're on schedule to hopefully have this completed within 18 months. So we'll have all of these reevaluations up to date, and then we will stagger out the next 7 years with those reevaluations.
Thank you, Sarah. Any comments from the board? Questions? Public comment?
Agenda item 8D, update on dental assisting examination statistics. So currently the board offers written examinations for our candidates. We have the RDA written examination, the RDA Law and Ethics examination, the EF written examination, the orthodontic assistant permit examination, and the dental sedation assistant written examination. And so this agenda item provides an overview of the overall number of candidates that have been tested over the last 12 months and what that passing score versus failed score looks like, and then also breaks down first-time candidates versus repeat candidates. We also offer the RDA EF clinical and practical examination. We conducted examinations in January of this year, and then we just had examinations earlier this month, which have not been included in this board meeting packet to date. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Additionally, in the board meeting packets is many, many pages of the breakdowns for each of the individual programs and courses that have been approved within our board and what their passing scores are.
Sir, does OPES give us any idea of what they'd like to see in terms of passing rates or failure rates, and how do we fall within those parameters?
So the passing score is always a topic of discussion with OPES, especially with the RDA written and law and ethics examinations. And the overall feedback we've gotten is that the passing score is on target with where it needs to be. So at this point, OPS is not concerned about the passing rate, but that is something that they continue to monitor as the examination is evaluated and administered through PSI.
Question. The continuing ed requirement for law and ethics is the same course given to dentists as well as RDAs. Is the content of the exam any different for dentists as opposed to RDAs?
Yes, so the continuing education requirement is the Dental Practice Act, and so it's a little bit different in that the board approves the continuing education provider and approves the course content outline for the Dental Practice Act. The law and ethics examination is different in that it's developed through workshops with subject matter experts and test question development and validation. And so that is based on a number of resources, both from educational textbooks, the Dental Practice Act, ethics resources as well. So it's different content, and we can't really compare the two together.
Further questions of the board? Public comments?
You know what, I can wait till the end. I just had a comment in reference to the Commission on Dental Accreditation or CODA-approved programs, so wherever that fits in.
We can take that now if you'd like to.
Okay. Dr. Lori Gallardi with the Foundation for Allied Dental Education Association. The question in reference to the CODA programs and how they fit in. You do have regulation in 1070.2 that does allow the board, if there is another outside accrediting agency that approves the program, to accept their findings. So I don't know that you've clearly defined that one way or the other, but you do have regulations that support the findings specifically from CODA and those results, and then there's a process that those programs can go through. So I guess my question would be, how will that be implemented in your reevaluation?
Great question. We'll agendize that for a future meeting. Thank you for giving us the information, though that question did arise. So your question we'll have to address at another time.
Any other questions of the board? Public members? Thank you, Sarah.
Agenda item 8E, update on dental assisting licensing statistics. So the dental board currently licenses in our dental assisting program registered dental assistants in extended functions, the orthodontic assistants, and the dental sedation assistants. The agenda item here provides an overview of the number of licenses that are current and active and current and inactive. So there is a requirement to renew your license on a 2-year basis. If an applicant or a licensee chose to go in an inactive status, they would have to continue to renew and pay the renewal fee. They would no longer have to continue completion of the continuing education courses. This agenda item also provides a breakdown of the number of licensees per county, and then also provides a ratio of the RDA to the DDSs that are licensed within those counties. Starting on page 4, there are tables indicating the number of applications that have been received by the board in 2018, those that have been approved, those that have been issued, licenses that have been issued, applications that have been canceled or withdrawn or denied as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Seeing none, public comment? Thank you.
Agenda item 8F, update regarding the combining of the RDA Law and Ethics and General Written Examination. So for the new board members, we completed a RDA occupational analysis in 2016. The Office of Professional Examination Services, otherwise known as OPES, conducted that review for us. Through that review, we found that we needed to look and review our current examination that we offer for the RDA written examination and the law and ethics examination. And they also recommended that the board consider combining the administration of those two examinations into one test administration to make it a more valid examination. And so the board embarked on this process a little over a year and a half ago. We have contracted with OPES. They've conducted all of the workshops and the test development. And so where we are right now is the test plan was released in November. That was posted on our board website. And we've been working with Breeze, and Breeze is our licensing and enforcement application that we use in the back office. We've been working with the Breeze team at DCA to develop this interface with PSI that is our testing administrator. And so at this point, the PSI candidate handbook has been released. It was released at the end of March for new candidates. And with this implementation, we've had to do a blackout period so that we could ensure that the results from the administration of the two separate examinations interfaced and were provided to our Breeze system accurately within this week. And so at this point in time, we are currently in the blackout period. The law and ethics and the written examinations as two separate examinations are no longer being offered. They went black yesterday, and it will continue to go black until Tuesday night when this new test will launch. And so starting next Wednesday, the 25th, I think it is, candidates will be able to call PSI and schedule taking the new combined examination. The test is very much the same. It's just a combining of the examination results. As with any new examination, there will be a delay in the release of the results. OPES typically estimates 4 to 6 weeks before the new candidates will receive their new results. The reason is they take the results of a certain number of candidates that have taken the initial examination to review the test results, validate that everything's working correctly, and set that new passing score. While they've given us a timeline of 4 to 6 weeks, I'm confident that it's probably not going to take that long of time given the number of candidates that we're testing on a monthly basis, especially this time of year. So at this point, everything's set to go. We are looking at launching it next week. Candidates, I would recommend not call PSI until the end of next week, just to make sure that PSI has the opportunity to make sure everything's set up and ready to go. We've communicated all of this information to the RDA program directors. We will continue to update the website. If for some reason something doesn't go according to plan next week, then we will be updating our website and sending out our outreach email blasts. So I would encourage all stakeholders or students or candidates to sign up to receive our email alerts so that they can stay abreast of the current updates.
I just wanted to comment. The Office of Professional Examinations determines what the passing score is, and this is sort of follow-up to Dr. Chan's comment. So OPES is only involved in determining what the passing score is. They really don't look at our statistics in terms of percentage of people who have passed. Do you see the subtle distinction? So OPES is determining the passing score, yet the board then is looking at how many people are passing or failing. And so I think that we're on the path to try to connect the dots now with the evaluation of the programs.
Is there a limit to the amount of times they can take the exam?
There isn't a limit to the number of times they can take the examination. They do have to take if they failed an examination, they have to retake that examination within 2 years. Otherwise, the exam or their application would become abandoned.
A question. Can you please tell me how you think this will affect combining both exams, the pass rate? How do you think that will affect it?
I wouldn't at this point expect a significant change in the passing rate that what we're already seeing in the 2 separate examinations. What this will provide is an opportunity for the candidates to only have to take 1 examination, only pay 1 examination fee, and only have the opportunity to take 1 examination if they fail. The 2 examinations can be cumbersome and arduous for our candidates to take. Sometimes it becomes a financial issue because they have to pay for the 2 separate administrations. At this point, I wouldn't expect a significant change in what we're seeing in the passing rates, but time will tell once the examination is launched.
And do you know the percentage of dental assistants that need to take the exam more than twice?
That is...
As it is right now?
Let me...
Dr. Witcher.
Sarah, as far as I understand it, the exam content is pretty similar to what it's been. They've just combined the 2 exams to get the number of questions up to
Correct.
get greater validity.
Correct.
I think they did some item writing and did add some new items in the course of giving an exam. You call the questions that are performing poorly, reword and rework things, and it's an ongoing process, which, is true of any exam of that level. But so I think, we have the exam template, I believe, is out for the combined exam, isn't it?
The PSI candidate handbook
Yeah,
and the
right.
examination outline are available on the board's website.
And so the typical information and the material shouldn't be anything totally new.
No, it should not be anything. The resources that were utilized for the development of the combined exam are the exact same resources that they utilized for the other 2 separate examinations, with the exception of they removed the Danby reference for ethics because they couldn't find any questions that actually directly correlated to that resource. That's really the only significant change. And as we do with the current RDA written examination, as Dr. Witcher just mentioned, we're continually reviewing that examination and developing test items so that we have a full test item bank to pull from and release those on a periodic basis to make sure that the examination remains valid. I just wanted to address Dr. Laren's question. On page 2 of the examination statistics, what we've provided, it's not a breakdown of the individuals based on how they qualify for RDA licensure, but it does give an overview of the passing rates for the first-time test takers versus the repeat test takers, if that's helpful.
Okay, any further questions of the board? Public comment?
Am I on? Oh, okay. Dr. Guy Atchison, Academy of General Dentistry. I guess a question I would have, my observation of people who've left their licenses lapse and reapply to have their licenses reactivated, a common requirement is that they take and pass the current law and ethics exam. So if that were your common pattern, somebody after this combined test is activated and they wanted to reactivate their license, now you're going to have people that have been working in the industry or not for 10 or 15 years, they're going to be taking the general content exam along with ethics, or is there going to be still a separate law and ethics for these special cases?
I'm happy to respond to that. It's 1 exam now.
Okay.
So those that have canceled license applying for new licenses will be required to take the 1 exam, which is written and ethics combined.
Okay.
If I could follow on to that, having served on committee where we review those applications, there is some discretion by LCP committee and when they are required to take the exam and when they are not. And usually what we look at is, are they current in the workplace? What's their experience and background? If they've been out 10 or more years, typically that's long enough that they need to do some kind of refresher, and would, I think, repeating the full exam would be warranted. At times in the past, we would order it both exams anyway for those kind of candidates. So it's a subtle shift. I think, you know, we'll see how this goes in LCP committee this time, but you know, that is something we're going to have to address, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, thank you.
I think I can answer that too. As in reviewing a lot of these applications, I've found that people that are being recertified are usually either out of the workplace completely, or they've come back prior to the 2010 revision. And so I think it's helpful, let's say, for an example, if a person has practiced in endo for 20 years, raises children, and comes back and decides they want to be in a restorative practice. Obviously, there's a lot of difference involved with that. So we look at everything, and we're very fair about that, about, you know, putting everything into perspective. And from that, you know, most of the time, if it's over, you know, 10 years, I think a refresher is not a bad thing for them.
Well, I think that's a great example of a dentist that's been lapsed for a while and coming back, and I've heard that it was, I think over these years, retaking the law and ethics was really one of the steps to go on, but they're not repeating the dental boards to reconfirm their basic dental knowledge. So I think there's some corollary there. It'd be interesting, the stakeholders for RDAs, with how they feel about this.
I think though, if somebody has a DDS that hasn't practiced for many years, you know, examination is part of it. You know, we do look at that, and for them to, we take rep, or
Okay.
we do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Further comment from the board? Public comment? Thank you, Sarah.
The next item, agenda item 8G, was a request made by Ms. Joan Greenfield. who-
Sarah, if I may,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've had a request to take a few-minute break before we move to the next agenda item, so I'm going to honor that. So can we take a break for 15 minutes and then come back? Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Okay, we're moving to agenda item 8G, and we have Joan Greenfield to present to us and to address this issue. Joan, before you do, I'd like to make some comments to this group, and that is this issue does involve scope issues. And normally, what we do in this area is that we would refer this topic for more thorough vetting and discussion to our DAC. But because we haven't had a quorum and there's no meeting at this meeting, but now we have 3 new members, and including an RDA member. And so I am going to ask you to present your material, which will give the board an opportunity to ask questions and add into the discussion. But then I think that what we will do, and I'm feeling more comfortable, I would like to send this to the DAC for more discussion in August. And the DAC then will bring a recommendation back to the full board. So with that understanding in that context, I'd like to welcome you to this meeting, and go ahead and if you're ready, go ahead and present.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart and Ms. Fisher, for allowing these items to come forward. I will say that this is the 3rd time that we have brought these items to the board, and been told the same thing to return. So I hope at some point we can actually make some headway. Is this on, by the way? I don't see a little button, so I guess it's permanently on. Thank you. So good morning to all of you, and thank you. First of all, we're talking about placement of gingival retraction cord. I think you've heard me deal with this before. In the EF2, and this is EF2, and EF2 programs, we are limited to teaching cord retraction for tissue management around prosthodontic appliances for crown or bridge. And we would like to see that function. I know that requires, I believe, not only a reg change, but a statutory change, I believe, because I think it's an original statute, from cord retraction to tissue management for prosthodontic procedures, so that would give us a wider range of ability to teach additional functions, so that the EF2 could manage whatever situation they're handed by their supervising dentist. And we're getting a lot of feedback from the supervising dentist that they want their assistant to be able to do more than just cord. Okay? So that's item one. Item two, if that were to occur, then we would like to consider having the cord retraction as a separately graded function on the EF2 exam removed. Currently, the student places the cord, the patient's taken away, and the examiners look at the cord, then the patient is returned to the student, where they remove the cord and take an impression. We believe that if there was any, other than an instrument that might have slipped and cut the gingival tissue, we believe that any damage to the sulcus or pocket would not be visible at that point, but would be visible at the time that the patient was returned to the examiners to look at the impression, and it could be graded at that point rather than making it two separately graded items. So we're not suggesting that it be removed from the exam, but simply that it be done in a different way, and that is more consistent with how an impression will be taken in the future. The other thing is that in the past and in regulation and statute, it lists a posterior amalgam and an anterior composite. And we're not here to argue over the validity of the use of amalgam or how much it's used or is not, although we have some statistics here. But would like to see in the future that the regulation states that the restorative examination shall consist of both an anterior and posterior restoration utilizing restorative materials specified by the board. And that gives the board then the leeway. Right now, you're stuck with specific materials. As new materials come along and as procedures change, and I think those of you who are practicing can speak to the issue that things are kind of rapidly changing in restorative dentistry, that would give the board a larger leeway. Okay.
Before you go on, maybe this is a stopping point to see if any member of the board has a specific question about I, 2I, 3I at this point?
Yeah, I think you raise an important point in that you can add dental assisting duties through regulation. However, the cord retraction is in statute.
Mm-hmm.
So whether we could add another duty to cover the scope is an open question. And that would be something more for legal, whether that would get by the regulatory process or, whether there'd be a problem with non-duplication there. But again, statutory change would take a different approach, I think.
Correct. I believe there is a statement at the end of the functions for EF2 that allow the board to add additional functions. This is really not, some of this is really not adding something as opposed to changing wording, but it's still a regulatory and statutory change. And the last area is something that we've been bringing forward for 7 years. Before we start that, I just, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I just want you to understand my background in regard to this particular thing, and that is local anesthesia and nitrous oxide. And in 1984, dental hygiene was able to obtain local anesthesia and nitrous oxide and soft tissue curettage as part of their practice. About 6 months later, I became the first and only private provider to be allowed to offer these courses as well, and then also submitted an application for Sacramento City College. So for the last 34 years, between J Productions Dental Seminars and Sacramento City College, we have been teaching local anesthesia and nitrous oxide to dental auxiliaries. So I believe that we have the background and knowledge to to speak to these issues. One of the first things that happened when EF2s became licensed in 2010, January 1st of 2010, 36 young ladies became licensed from the first group of graduates and from our program. And within 6 months, we started getting requests, when are we going to get local anesthesia? Because we're doing full restorative procedures that the dentist normally does. We began working on this issue, and I knew that early on we were not going to get too far, but you have to start someplace. So it is now 8.5 years in practice. I think that the EF2 has proven themselves as a very important component of restorative dentistry. And so we are currently looking at an option of offering local anesthesia and nitrous oxide certification as optional permits after the individual has successfully completed and become licensed as an EF2. The reason we're suggesting it be done that way is that EF2 is the only level of dental assisting that requires post-secondary education. We want to see that the person has successfully completed that education. And some of the background information they would need for local anesthesia is also included in some part in the EF2 programs via their patient assessment stuff. So we're looking at a very rigorous program. I have a little handout here that has a blue side and a purple side with just a little bit of overview on comparison of hygiene programs throughout the United States, the hygiene program here in California in regard to these two functions, and what we are proposing. So again, I understand that you want me to go back through a committee, but just to let you know that this is extremely well thought. We have also been working on regulatory language that would be very specific. I think you would be very impressed with the level of education that we would require for this. We also did a survey in 2017 to ask specifically which injections are actually fully utilized in dental offices for restorative dentistry. And we found that there was only 7 out of the 16 injections that hygiene can legally do, because there were some that were added a couple of years ago. Only about 7 of those are actually routinely used to 50, 60, or 70% or higher. So we're looking specifically at those, with perhaps a continuing education requirement in the future if somebody wanted to learn to do some other injection. So in regard to nitrous, the thing is, in California, a dental assistant can adjust the flow of gases of nitrous oxide if the dentist is in the room at chairside giving directions to do so, except for an emergency. If you think about it, if a person is working in an office and the dentist is using nitrous oxide on their patient to do the preparation, that patient's going to remain on nitrous oxide. And they may be remaining on nitrous oxide for a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour, or in the case of offices that are doing cadmial restorations, up to 2 hours. Okay. That EF is in that room by themselves and cannot legally adjust the flow of gases. Well, if you use nitrous, you know that during that long time period, you probably need to adjust the percentage of nitrous that's being used. And legally, it can't do so. So start feeling that if the EF is actually working on patients that are under nitrous oxide, they should be required to meet the same ADA standards of education for nitrous oxide if they're going to utilize it. And that's why we want to make it an optional permit. So they're not forced to take it, but if they work in an office that does use nitrous, that they could utilize it. So that's my dog pony show. And so the next meeting is in August. Is that true?
Yes, and I'd like to open the discussion up to our board members at this point for any questions. And let's see, I think I saw Dr. Lay, and then we'll go to Dr. Chan and Dr. Witcher.
So you mentioned that there is an existing teaching model in California that trains dental auxiliaries on the administration of local anesthesia. Where is that?
No, there's an existing model with dental hygiene.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay,
Right.
okay. Yeah, because you say dental auxiliaries, and I just want to make sure that it's not.
No, it's yeah,
okay,
if you look at the purple side there, the blue side, it'll compare, what I said is compare, what we did is a comparison of hygiene programs on a national basis, and they're all over the map. There's no specific hours.
Okay.
Then we looked at DHCCs and felt that we would need to up the level of education, of course,
Okay.
for this, so, yeah.
I'm just confused, because when it says dental auxiliaries, I'm thinking of dental assistants as
Mhm.
well.
Okay.
But it's actually, the existing model is only for dental hygiene.
The existing model on a
Thank
national basis is dental hygiene.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Chan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In your experience with the didactic as well as the clinical models, is there a component of teaching pediatric anatomy, physiology, toxicology, pharmacology? 'Cause it's different.
In our model, yes. Yes. As a
And-
matter of fact, I've had opportunity over the years to testify before the DHCC in regard to various issues because we were providers, and I did bring that to their attention that they did not include that in their regulations. So we have built that into our regulation that pediatric care must be part, according to ADA's pediatric guidelines.
And the age range for pediatrics is what?
Well, if you, below 12,
As young as what?
we're not suggesting a specific age range for nitrous or anesthesia, and if that's something the board wants to put in place, they can do so.
Local anesthetic is a drug. Let's separate
Absolutely.
out the nitrous oxide, but local anesthetic is a drug, and the younger the age, the less the body weight.
Sure.
So toxicology comes into play, misinterpretation comes into play, and the interpretation of the functions for a dental hygienist doing whatever functions they're going to need to do is going to be different than an EF, which is restorative.
Right, but many offices utilize hygienists to give anesthesia for all their patients, not just their own. So we would be totally open to any limitation in pediatric care. I would have to also say that we very strongly feel that pediatric considerations are part of nitrous oxide because of large tonsils and not complete respiratory system. So very concerned and definitely on the same wavelength.
Dr. Witcher, I believe, and then Dr. Morrow.
I know we've heard your presentation a couple times in the past, and maybe council could look at this, but did we really resolve that these are duties we could add through regulation?
No, nothing's ever occurred.
Let me finish, please.
I'm sorry.
If you look at 1750, there are some prohibitions on administration of nitrous and local, pretty specifically. There are exemptions to that, but those are made in statute rather than in regulation. So are we dealing here with a special category where we can't add things without statutory change, or can we do this? And I just pose that as a question because, I think, as we pointed out, this needs further review, but I think it's going to be a very different approach if we need statutory change than if we need reg change. So we should just answer that right up front.
In looking through things, I understand that at one point in time, hygiene attempted to pass something that allowed only a DDS and a hygienist to give local anesthesia in California. And I don't know, Tony, if that ever did. Hygiene at one point attempted to get some regulatory language passed that it would block anyone else from giving local anesthesia, but a dentist and a hygienist. Did that ever? I couldn't find it anywhere. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, I think that was put aside. So to my knowledge, I was assuming this would be a statutory change as well, but it may not be. I don't know, to be honest.
Well, that was my point,
Yeah.
is I just think we need to answer that question because it's a very different approach. I mean, to add it through regulation, that process. If
Right.
statute, we got to go to the legislature, and
Right.
that's a whole different thing, so.
Yeah, it's my understanding that as long as that doesn't exist, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I don't know if council is aware of it someplace, that it could be a regulatory change addition.
Dr. Morrow?
I just want to make a couple of comments that I think are valid at this point in time. I think we're sort of knocking on the door, dancing around some places that we're going to have to go exceedingly in the future, in the present and the future. Delivery of healthcare is changing. Part of that is technology driven, and part of it is a decision as to who is capable of providing what care to what patient. We're going to be looking at, I think, in order to meet those requirements of our community from a healthcare standpoint, some significant changes, both statutory and regulatory. We are making monumental changes in the educational process. The development and implementation of technology into the practice of dentistry is overwhelming. It is like a high-speed train, and we're having, big challenges in education to meet those requirements of technology from a standpoint of training our faculty, as well as purchasing the technology to be able to educate our students to the use of that technology. And that's going to continue. So I think we need to fasten our seatbelts and look down the road to say we're going to have to deal with these issues from a statutory as well as a regulatory viewpoint. And we just have to fasten our seatbelts and be up to the task it's going to require in the near future. Tomorrow.
Can I come back tomorrow? No, I'm kidding.
I see Ms. Burton's hand.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Tony, but I am. What, under this blue chart, the DHCC and local anesthetic chart,
I don't know if he has that. It's right here.
what local anesthetics can a hygienist?
All these that are listed here. Okay.
Is there a button?
There's no button.
Oh, hello? Yeah. Under the current law, the hygienist can perform a series of local anesthesia injections. And so those are taught in length during the dental hygienist educational program, over a 2-year program.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a laundry list in our regulation as far as which local anesthetic injections that they can provide, and I can show you a list of that.
Those are listed there.
Would what California does it include all of these injections that are listed here?
It can, and it depends on what's required as far as what the procedures that are going to be done. So they can do all of these injections, but again, it depends on the specific procedure.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to make one more comment. What's happening here is that the more common types of local anesthesia that are used for pulpal anesthesia, which is what we're dealing with as opposed to tissue or for hygiene, lasts anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes. And typically these RDA EFs2s are working on patients for significantly longer than that. So in the middle of their procedure, the patient is their teeth are starting to come around and they're starting to be in discomfort. And so one of the important issues here too is so then they have to run around and either find a dentist or a hygienist, interrupt their scope of practice to come and re-inject as well. So one of the big issues and push for that is not only that it should be long with restorative procedures in the first place, but that for the comfort and safety of the patient as well is a very important issue here. And I have these stories all the time.
Public comment?
Yeah, there's no button.
No button. Hello, I'm Maureen Titus. I'm with California Dental Hygienists Association. If the board decides to follow through on this major scope change, and it is a scope change, it's not a regulatory change. It is a scope of practice. It means it has to go before the legislation. We do have some concerns. When you talk about educational standards, I realized that that program taught hygienists the anesthesia courses. The scope of practice that the hygienist does and their educational standards before they even got to that particular program are significantly different than what an RDA EF does. There's no comparison to those standards of education. You cannot compare the two standards of education for delivering anesthesia or nitrous in a dental office. So I think a really serious review needs to be a side-by-side comparison of what is required in an RDH program, what an RDA EF has to provide, because it's very, very different. On-the-job training is not a current standard of care for California for hygienists, and it shouldn't be for RDA EF2s either. We're saying that will this really increase access to care for people in California, where that's a big push right now, as Dr. Morrow was talking about some of the rapid changes that are happening. This would basically help the dentists who employ RDA EFs. It's not going to help the underserved consumers of California who can't access a traditional dental office. So I'd like to bring that forward. We don't want to compromise the health and safety of the population just for the expediency in a dental office. And I believe that that is not something that we want to go for in the state of California. We want the utmost safety in this area. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Did I see a hand? I'm sorry. Dr. Lay?
Yes, and I would like to agree with the last speaker. I don't think this change in scope will really increase or improve the access to care of anyone. I think it's more of the convenience for the practitioners, for the assistants, so that the dentists don't have to get up and they walk to the next chair to anesthetize the patient. It has absolutely to do with access to care, so I want to make that very clear. If you do a survey, many community clinics in California do not employ EF2. Very few do. So I don't think that the rationale of changing the scope in order to increase access is a valid one at this time.
May I respond? Yeah, I don't believe that I mentioned access to care as an issue for doing this, although it is part of what's happening. I believe that you're incorrect in your assumption that primary care and rural Indian health and other public health clinics do not employ EF2s. Every single class that we do and the other providers in Northern California have significant numbers of people that work in those clinics, and it has changed access to care. So perhaps I need to do a little survey and come up with that information to help you better understand that access to care has been significantly changed by the addition of EF2s, not only in clinics but in offices that accept third-party carriers and Dentacare as well. In regard to the comment by Hygiene, in making some comment about office trained, there is no category of office trained RDA F2s. This is mandatory post-secondary education. So I have to disagree with almost everything she said.
Joan,
and some of them
thank
not
you
true.
for bringing that up. Could you briefly explain to some of our new board members what the difference is between the RDA EF and the EF2?
RDA, and technically there is no such thing as a 1 and a 2, but those are utilized to help the dentist and other people determine what functions can actually occur. I believe around 32 years ago, EF1 occurred, and at that time it was cord retraction, final impression, and pit and fissure sealants, and a minor endodontic procedure. Over the years, that was in place for many years, and then in 2019, Governor Schwarzenegger signed into law the addition of more functions, and so most of the licenses don't say EF1 or 2, they would see RDA EF pursuant to sections such and such as of January 1st, 2010, meaning that anyone after January 1st of 2010 must complete a program that included all those functions. The addition of the functions were basically all direct and indirect restorations, meaning fillings, crowns, bridges, or anything else that falls into direct and indirect restoration, along with the addition of some minor procedures in endodontics. So anyone after 2010 is automatically an EF2 who can perform both the 1 and 2 functions. And sealants were moved into the RDA category.
Dr. Morrow.
Thanks, Dr. Stewart. I just want to bring to our attention, and I think to the attention of our new board members, that our state neighbor to the east, Arizona, has just approved the dental therapist model of patient care. That is an access to care issue, and that is something that we will be dealing with. I guarantee and I promise that we will be dealing with that in the near future. Access to care is an issue, and Arizona and other states have taken advantage of the dental therapist model, and it is working in those states, and it will come to our state as well.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow.
One last comment. Yeah, I think we have to remember we have the Little Hoover Commission that is looking at professional licensing and, how that works. And there's, as just a second what Dr. Morrow says, we're going to be seeing a lot of changes in the way that this is done, I think.
Hi, Tony.
Good morning, Anthony Lum, Dental Hygiene Committee, Executive Officer. I just wanted to echo what Ms. Titus and Dr. Lay had said in regards to expanding this scope, because it's something where, in comparison to a dental hygienist, where they've gone through a rigorous educational course for 2 years, also have completed extensive prerequisites to get to that point in order to do these functions. I think it's something where extensive training is required to do these things safely for patients in the interest of consumer protection. And, it's something where at this point, further research, I think, needs to be done if you're going to pursue this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Thank you, Joan.
Right, that's one of the reasons we have significantly increased the requirements for this particular course, far exceeding that of dental hygiene. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make one comment for board members. We currently have 1,400 active RDA EFs. We don't know how many of them they have active licenses. We don't know how many of them are actually doing the EF duties and how they're being utilized. So that's a piece of the puzzle that we still need to sort of get a handle on. So I believe Dr. Stewart was recommending essentially that this issue is going to go before the DAC in August.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I believe we're on agenda item 9A, legislative calendar.
Good morning. My name is Allison Varamontes. I'm the board's legislative and regulatory analyst. In regards to 9A, we are looking at the 2018 tentative legislative calendar. It is the same as the last that we presented in February. There has not been any changes. The most notable date that's coming up is June 1st for both Senate and Assembly houses, and it's just the last day for each house to pass bills introduced in their house. If you guys have any questions, or if Ms. Burton would like to add.
I wanted to back up and point out May 18th is the last day for policy committees to meet prior to June 4th. Okay. And May 25th is the deadline for fiscal committees.
Any board questions, any public comment? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 9B, the discussion and possible action on legislation. So the board is currently tracking 49 bills. Within your materials, there are 13 bills with legislative bill analysis, as well as the bill itself that we'll be discussing today. We've also included within this memo 9 bills for informational purposes. They are accessible either through LegInfo on the website on the back page, but we did not provide those bills just because we didn't want it to be too overwhelming, since we do have many bills to discuss today.
And I just wanted to say for new members, because I've already gotten this question about why we don't look at everything in dentistry. We concentrate on what our mission and our guidelines are. So there are some things that you will see that are related to dentistry that we don't look at because they don't have to do with licensing or probation.
Fran, a question for your clarification. We're going to be going through some of these bills, and I see many times that we make a decision to watch. For our new members and for some of us that want to hear it again, could you tell us what that means when we are falling down on the watch? What does that speak to?
Let me just back up and say that there are a number of positions that we can take. I believe that support is almost always limited to bills that we actually are directly involved in, and perhaps we sponsor. It's hard. It's hard, given the way our meetings are spaced out, to support bills when in the process, and you will hear a lot of this from Allison as we go through this, as they go through the process, these bills are amended so much that we will take a position, and then the example that I've used before is that we're talking about dogs and then it becomes about cats, or it comes about something else, and there you are and you've supported something and you try to retract that. And so for the most part, a watch position is to just keep our eyes on that bill until there comes to a point where we can either support it, be neutral, or in some cases oppose it.
It's helpful, thank you.
If anyone has any questions, otherwise we can start, I believe, on Assembly Bill 224. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Alice.
And I'll just try to give just a brief, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Just a brief description or just summary about what the bill is, and from there. So if there's no other questions, Assembly Bill 224, the dentistry, anesthesia, and sedation. Real quick, I apologize. Jerry is passing out two bills. They have been amended and they were not included within, or they were included, but an old version was included within your material, so that's why Jerry's passing them out. And I'll let you know which bills. I believe it's AB 2643 and SB 1482. We've had updated versions since the materials were provided. So Assembly Bill 224, it would implement portions of the dental board's recommendations, including their pediatric anesthesia study that was provided to the legislature. This bill would change the way the board regulates pediatric anesthesia by enhancing requirements for the administration of general anesthesia and deep sedation for patients 13 years of age and younger. Currently, this bill is still held in the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee as of July 10th, 2017.
Members, you will notice that there hasn't been any action on this bill since July 17th. And I think the last time we checked, we don't really have any more of an update on that. So this is one that I think that we don't need to discuss at this time.
Okay. Moving on to the next bill.
I have a question. In your analysis on 224, you state that it has been withdrawn by the author. What does that mean?
So there were amendments that they initially had during, they were going to present, I believe, during that committee, and the author withdrew those amendments, and since then, the bill has not been moved on. There's been no amendments made available to the public or anything like that. Mhm. Okay. Moving on to Assembly Bill 2086. This bill would allow a prescriber to access the Cures database for a list of patients where he or she is listed as a prescriber in the database.
Any discussion?
I see on this that we've taken a support position. On page 3.
I think that was staff's recommendation that they support, but as Ms. Burton noted, we don't usually.
Are we being asked to approve that recommendation or at this point in time?
At this point, I don't see any reason why not. This is one of those exceptions, because we want to be supportive of
I
the
agree.
Cure
I will
system.
move that we approve the staff's recommendation to support this bill.
Second? Jan. Any public comment? Call for the vote.
Burton,
Yes.
Chan. Yes. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai. Laren. Yes. Lay. Yes. McKenzie, absent. Medina.
Yes.
Morrow. Yes. Olag. Yes. Pacheco. Yes. Stewart.
Yes.
Witcher.
Yes.
You is absent. This motion passes.
So we will get a letter to the author on this bill?
Okay. Okay, moving on to Assembly Bill 2138. I did want to note that under the version, it says it was amended on 4/24/2018. It was not. That was that was an error. It was last amended on April 2nd, 2018, and that is the version that you have within your materials. I will attempt to provide a brief summary on AB 2138, but I will warn you it is very lengthy. So I apologize, I might be talking for a little bit. So this bill would authorize the board to, among other things, deny, revoke, or suspend a license on the grounds that the applicant or licensee has been convicted of a crime only if the applicant or licensee is presently incarcerated or if the conviction as defined occurred within the preceding 5 years, except for violent felonies, and would require the crime to be directly and adversely related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession. The bill would prohibit a board from denying a person of a license based on the conviction of a crime or on the basis of acts underlying a conviction for a crime if the conviction has been dismissed or expunged, if the person has made a showing of rehabilitation, if the person has been granted clemency or a pardon, or if an arrest resulted in a disposition other than a conviction. The bill would provide that these provisions relating to denial, revocation, or suspension of a license would supersede contradictory provisions in specified existing law. This bill would also require the board to develop criteria for determining whether a crime is directly and adversely related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession. It would require a board to find that a person has made a showing of rehabilitation if certain conditions are met. The bill would also require a board to follow certain procedures when requesting or acting on an applicant or licensee's criminal history information. The bill would also require a board to annually submit a report to the legislature and post the report on its internet website containing specified de-identified information regarding actions taken by a board based on an applicant or licensee's criminal history information. This bill would prohibit a board, again, from denying a license based solely on an applicant's failure to disclose a fact that would not have been cause for denial of the license had the fact been disclosed. The bill would repeal authority that allows a board to suspend a license if a licensee is not in compliance with a child support order or judgment. The bill also would prohibit a board from taking disciplinary action against a licensee or denying a license for professional misconduct if the licensee has successfully completed certain diversion programs or alcohol and drug problem assessment programs or deferred entry of judgment. This bill would additionally authorize the board to grant the license and immediately issue a public approval. The bill would limit probationary terms or restrictions placed on a license by a board to 2 years or less and would authorize additional conditions to be imposed only if the board determines that there is a clear and convincing evidence that additional conditions are necessary to address a risk shown by clear and convincing evidence. The bill requires a board to develop criteria to aid in considering the imposition of probationary conditions and to determine what conditions may be imposed. The bill also authorizes a licensee or registrant whose license or registration has been placed on probation to petition the board for a change to that probation 1 year from the effective date of the board's decision. It would require the board to issue a decision on the petition within 90 days and would deem the petition granted if the board does not file a decision denying the petition within 90 days. So it's a very lengthy bill.
Open this up to the board for any comments or?
This is one that kind of gives me some heartburn because it goes against a lot of what our requirements are for public protection. And I believe this is one that I'd asked you if our enforcement folks had looked at.
They did.
Was it?
They did. We did get a little bit of information. I think we put that within the bill analysis, but they did look at it. Did you want me to discuss anything about like the meetings or anything like that?
There are several other boards and bureaus within DCA that have taken positions, most notably probably medical board. There was also a meeting held, a stakeholder meeting held that we participated in to kind of address what the fiscal challenges will be. This bill will have a significant fiscal impact on our board, and it will impact how we review applications. So most notably from what I'm getting out of this at this point is that currently when we receive applications, we have the authority to request whether or not they've had a criminal conviction or a conviction, and the applicant is required to answer the question truthfully. In addition to that, they are required to provide the arrest or the court documents that come along with that. If this bill were to go into effect, we would no longer have that authority to ask that question. We would not know, and we would no longer have the authority to ask the applicant to provide those court and arrest documents. That poses a couple of issues. So we would still get the rap sheets. They would still be required to fingerprint. At that point, it would be staff's responsibility to identify where on the rap sheet we needed to request the additional arrest and court records. And we have come in the past up against a challenge where those courts and offices are not able to provide those documents to us. So there's definitely going to be challenges on the licensing side. On the enforcement side, some areas that we see concern is we don't know what licensing population could potentially be applying as a result of this. I think there's this overarching feeling that, I have a criminal history and I'm probably not going to get licensed, so I'm not even going to try. So with that being said, and if this went into effect, we wouldn't know or be able to anticipate what the potential licensing workload would amount to. So that's another concern. We would probably have backlogs related to the requesting of records. There's difficulty with the 90-day hearing process and whether or not that would even be attainable. And because that's outside of our control, usually hearings and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think hearings can take up to a year at times to schedule for denials. So, and then it would also reduce the amount of the probationary term to 2 years. So all of those have been discussed, but at this point, this is going to have a significant impact on our program.
And I think that I would add to that there are some things where we just outright would not license. Or if there are things that licensees would do, we would revoke, period. So this really gives me a lot of concern. I don't know whether the department has taken a position on it for healing arts boards. Probably not.
No, they have not.
Okay. And so I think the question for us is if we want to begin to outline some of those things and put them in writing for the author. So that's my question to the group.
I have a question. Regarding because I see it as an equity, and I notice the organizations that are supporting it, I'm wondering, those that check off that they had a prior conviction might not be relevant for them not to be able to apply, but since you mentioned it could be a factor for them that they just don't do it. So if they check off that they have been convicted, what happens then? Currently, right now.
So the current process right now is if an applicant checks off that they've been convicted of a crime, and they answer honestly and they provide their explanation and their documents, it goes before a review of the enforcement chief and the licensing manager and then ultimately Karen. It's a case-by-case decision on whether or not a denial is warranted. And it's only in cases where there would be potential public harm where an applicant is deemed to be denied. At that point, once they're denied, they have the appeals process where they can request an appeal of the decision. It would go before an administrative law judge in a hearing, and there's potential where they could be issued a probationary license with standard terms and conditions. We also have the option, there are some circumstances where a probationary license is just issued outright. If they accept that, then they can practice, then they would have the terms and conditions that are agreed upon. In a case where an applicant did not disclose that they had a conviction and that we got hits on the rap sheet, again, it's the same process. Lying on the application does not necessarily mean that they would not receive a license. So again, it's very much on a case-by-case basis, dependent upon what the conviction information is, what the arrest documents indicate, what have they done to remediate and rehabilitate. So that's all taken into consideration. And I don't actually have our denial rates right now, but it's not a significant population that's denied outright.
And the reason why I say this is because of what Ms. Fran mentioned. Well, looking at certain areas that, we could, because it will impact, especially in the 90 days, could impact the way we do things. But at the same time, maybe making some recommendations of where we can adjust some languages, because I imagine there are true issues within individuals not applying because of that and being deterred, thinking that something small is actually something that can be up for denial, not knowing the whole aspect. So I'm curious on how we can do that with the changing or adjusting or recommending languages within this.
Just to comment, there's no such thing as something small if you have a conviction. Now, if the conviction has been expunged, we're just asking to be able to have all the information. And this bill, to some degree, restricts our ability to get the information. So currently, we operate with a case-by-case basis. And depending on how long it's been since the person had the conviction, whether or not it has been expunged, we have to take into consideration. And what would happen if it went to an administrative law judge is that the administrative law judge would be looking at what the particular candidate has done to rehabilitate themselves so that we would have some sort of an assurance that that wouldn't be happening again. But typically, we really don't have these issues with dentists. It's primarily with RDAs. And so I just generically call it bad behavior, but it's serious bad behavior that's led, it's either, drug or alcohol abuse or misuse or sale. Of course, there's no question about sexual misconduct. Those rise to the highest level. We have issues with fraud, as you've seen through our discipline, where people steal prescription pads and things like that. So this bill, we really don't know how this is going to end up. I know that the department is pulling together all the other boards to try to get an idea of where this is going. I think at this point, that's why we recommended the watch position.
Okay.
But I just feel, at least in its current form, what this bill is probably just going to do is make it more difficult for us to have all the information up front. And
I didn't mean small as, I'm looking at it as misdemeanor, felony, and then there's different
Right.
cases where it's not necessarily, it impedes on their practice. So that's what I
Right.
meant, that
Yeah.
there's many that, I can't even name it right now, but I imagine there are many.
Yeah, and we have
cases where they
thresholds that
don't.
we take into consideration. For example, the population of society has trouble with drinking and driving under the influence. So you don't lose your license or your discipline necessarily for one or two. We take into consideration the time frame that has occurred between the arrests and those things. So we already have the discretion to be able to do that. I don't think that necessarily is going to change, but there is some concern about, see, right now, the candidate or the applicant divulges that information up front. And so depending on how this bill goes, there's some question about whether it'll be more incumbent upon us to find out information. Sarah's.
I just wanted to make another comment in regards as to why staff had recommended a watch position. So we attended a stakeholder meeting, and the author's offices are very well aware of all of these issues because they've been expressed a multitude of times, because everything we've stated today, it impacts DCA-wide, especially for the healing arts boards. And so I think they're working, trying to work with all of the boards and bureaus to come to kind of a consensus on where maybe we can meet in the middle. And so with that in mind, I believe they're anticipating having amendments and appropriations by the end of the month. They didn't indicate what those amendments would be. And so this bill could change in format significantly or not significantly over the next 2 weeks. So for that reason, we had recommended a watch
If I
position
may,
as
what
well.
I think I heard Fran say was that it would be a good thing to write a letter to the author and
But I think in light of this information, which I didn't have, and the fact that there have been those discussions, I would retract that. Because there have been those discussions
Just
and,
recently, as of Friday.
okay, I wasn't aware of that.
So you don't think it would be a help to the author to have some of our thoughts and some of our concerns?
I think what I've been hearing from Sarah is that there's been a stakeholder group that's met with the author.
So a stakeholder meeting was held with the author's office and their staff, and all of these issues that we've brought forward today were addressed at that meeting. They've already received fiscal analyses. They're well aware of the potential impacts that this would have across the board, and they're trying to mitigate how they can move forward with their goal and while promoting consumer protection at the same time.
And I wanted to go back to your question and say, because I know of some of these groups that are supporting this bill, I see where they're coming from. It would have been different to me if this wasn't every state board. In healing arts, it's different. It's very different, and we have different concerns and a different obligation for protecting the public. If it were not all state boards, I probably wouldn't have as much of an issue with it, but because of what we've seen with discipline on both ends, on the professional end and on the dental assistant end, I have a real problem with this.
And I'm glad you said that because when you look at what recommendations come out, sometimes there are some equity issues within time of probation for a certain individual compared to someone that else that might have done something similar. And so that's, so I see both sides, but just looking at some of the equity issues I'm thinking of, that's where they're coming from. But it's still protecting the patients. We just need to make sure that we're not overdoing it. I mean, never overdoing protecting the patients, but not forgetting the individuals as well that are in the practice.
So if there's not any further discussion, I'm going to move a watch on this. And the second is, okay, the second is lay. Public comment.
Anthony Lone, Dental Hygiene Committee. I just wanted to reiterate what Sarah said because I was involved with that meeting with all the stakeholders and all. And I brought up a few good points because my committee receives a lot of applicants and questions from applicants and actually applications from individuals who do have a conviction on their record, and they do divulge that to us. We do take those on a case-by-case basis, and since I've been with the committee that I've researched, we've only denied maybe 3 licenses in total. For the most part, what we do is review the case, and we actually issue a probationary license. So we understand that, we want to get these people into the workforce. However, licensees are held to a little bit higher standard than just your average Joe because they have all the education, they have all the requirements that are needed to perform their services in the interest of for consumers. So in our role as, the entity for consumer protection, we want to make sure that those individuals are vetted appropriately, make sure that they've rehabbed appropriately, and then give them a chance to work, and that's why we issue the probationary license. Just for this bill directly, just as an example of what I presented when we had the stakeholder meeting, there's a 5-year timeline that you can go back and request stuff for convictions, and whether that's a minor thing or what have you. With the number of applicants that have alcohol or substance misuse issues, a lot of our DUIs and the like go back beyond 5 years. So if they only have a pattern of 2 times within that last 5 years, but then they had 4 prior to those 5 years, we can't use those to make a decision. And so the way I look at it is that, okay, say this person was actually caught twice, but how many times were they actually out there that they didn't get caught? So, we want to give them a chance, but yet we want to vet them appropriately. From the meetings that I've been involved with, all the other boards have mentioned, and I'm not speaking for them, I'm just saying what the information was, that the number of total denials was minuscule. Thank you.
Burton? Yes. Chan? Yes. Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai? Yes. Laren? Yes. Lay? Yes. McKenzie?
So even though I came in the middle, but I read it, is it appropriate for me to vote? Okay, then yes.
Medina?
Yes.
Morrow? Yes. Olag? Yes. Pacheco? Yes. Stewart? Yes. Witcher? Yes. Yu is absent. And the motion has passed to follow the staff recommendation.
Okay, the next, sorry.
Excuse me just for a second. Jerry, and so the record reflects Meredith joined us at, what, 11:30?
Okay.
Thank you.
The next bill is Assembly Bill 2483, indemnification of public officers and employees antitrust awards. So this bill would require a public entity to pay a judgment or settlement for treble damage antitrust awards against a member of a regulatory board within the Department of Consumer Affairs for an act or omission occurring within the scope of the member's official capacity as a member of that regulatory board. The bill would specify that treble damages awarded pursuant to a specified federal law for violation of another federal law are not punitive or exemplary damages within the act. There has been, since we provided the legislative analysis, there has been movement on this bill. As of May 3rd, 2018, it passed from the Assembly Appropriations Committee and is now in, it's now passed Assembly to the Senate.
Just for members who have been around for a while, this bill came out of the decision in the North Carolina Board of Dental Examiners case. And our recommendation on this is to support.
Dr. Chan, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Let's see. Well, to start, I was president of the California Dental Association when FTC versus CDA went to the Supreme Court. And you realize the feds have more money than we do. So this raises the antenna. However, the crux of the argument for antitrust was that in North Carolina, there's a majority of dentists there, and they're on the board, they are mostly in private practice. On our board, we have 8 dentists, 7 public members, so there's not a majority per se. And of the 8 dentist members, there's 1 educator and 1 public health member. So they have less incentives to drive that marketplace in there. So we may not have that same thing. However, the specter of being sued as individuals is still there.
Tom? Yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't want protection from punitive damages.
Dr. Stewart? Ma'am, maybe I misunderstood you. Did you say that our position was to support? I think staff's recommendation is to watch on this.
Question? Can we, question? Can we ask Michael what the definition of punitive damages means in this kind of application? I'm not sure what that means.
Well, punitive is just tacked on at the end. It's not anything that is like a cost recovery or directly related to any of the fees or any administrative costs you might incur. It's just basically meant as a penalty or a punishment. That's what punitive basically means.
That doesn't help.
Well, it's just anything outside of, and that's why punitive damages are either capped or discretionary, such that they're not related to a cost you have to show. So that's the basic definition of what a punitive damage is. So I don't know what you're saying in the context, because I don't think there's any change when we're talking about if there's a North Carolina case and any punitive damages. So I don't know if you're looking for something further or confused further about that. It's just that they can seek treble damages. That's the punitive damage that you're seeking against the person.
Karen?
Again, I think that the legislature is trying to ensure that the boards are protected. I think that you shouldn't be worried at this point because we've been doing business quite differently than the North Carolina case. There have been a lot of legal opinions out there that have really not clarified the situation, but have added probably more confusion. So the staff recommendation for this is watch, knowing that the legislature has you in mind, that it wants to make sure that safeguards are in place to move forward. So at this point, I believe they would expect you to be supporting that, yes, you would want to be protected in making your decisions. So at this point, the recommendation is watch just for that purpose.
Also, I think another important thing for us to remember and understand is that one of the major problems with North Carolina case was lack of administrative state oversight in what the dental board decided to do. And I believe that our system here in California certainly provides for that administrative oversight as far as what the board's decisions are, rather than the board acting as an independent entity to strike out at somebody and give them a cease and desist letter to do something or not do something without state oversight. And I think we have that state oversight here.
Dr. Chan?
As Allison, this bill applies to the federal law, but not within the state of California, is that correct?
I believe it was to federal, but I would have to take a look at the bill again. I believe, though, it did apply to federal.
Wouldn't it apply to any and all actions against a board member, whether it was state or federal? In other words, if it went to district court, we would still have protection. I don't see why that would matter, which I think that's your question, right?
Yeah, I mean, for purposes of this section, treble damages are awarded pursuant to the Federal Clayton Act for a violation of the Federal Sherman Act, and there are not punitive or exemplary damages under this division. That's all of the language that the bill added.
Are you good, Dr. Chan?
I'm not sure how to frame this because we're addressing strictly the bill itself that has to do with potential interactions with federal law, has nothing to do with what happens within the state of California. So
And
this, go ahead.
I think you want to mix apples and oranges.
You do want to mix it?
That you do.
No, I don't want to.
Under state law, we are protected. There have been several cases of attempts to sue the board and to name the board members individually. We are protected. This bill only addresses what happened in the North Carolina case and the federal antitrust protection guarantees. Does that help?
That was my point.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think on the last, excuse me, two sentences of the legislative bill analysis, this was the AB 2043 is the Attorney General's recommendation, and he tried to clarify that there's an uncertainty about the legal status of treble damages as it relates to board members, and this could be reduced significantly by amending state law to specify that treble damage antitrust awards are not punitive within the meaning of the act, which is what I think AB 24.
And to address those treble damages because it came up in the North Carolina case.
Correct.
Anything else?
Dr. Chan?
Yes, ma'am.
I would recommend that you have a sidebar conversation with our legal counsel, Mr. Santiago, and maybe you can get further clarification.
I'm actually clear that this applies to just federal law. It has nothing to do with the state.
The motion is to watch.
Second.
Witcher.
I'm sorry, the second is
Witcher.
Witcher. Any public comment? Call for the vote.
Burton,
Yes.
Chan,
Yes.
Chappelle Ingram, absent. Lai,
Yes.
Laren. Lay. McKenzie.
Yes.
Medina. Morrow. Olag. Pacheco. Stewart.
Yes.
Witcher.
Yes.
You is absent. Motion passes.